Imagine being Hollywood's biggest star and being told to marry someone you don't love or lose everything. That was reality during cinema's golden age. Studios controlled more than just films. They controlled who their stars married, who they loved, and who they pretended to be. Behind closed doors, they called these arrangements Lavender marriages. One man was the #1 box office star in America when his studio gave him an ultimatum: marry a woman or walk away from millions. His response changed everything, and his story ended with a suicide note that would break your heart. This isn't gossip. These are real stories from the people who lived them. William Haynes, the man who said no. In 1930, William Haynes was Hollywood's biggest moneymaker. While other silent film stars failed when sound arrived, Haynes thrived. He was one of only 7 MGM stars whose name appeared above the title. But Haynes had something Hollywood couldn't tolerate. He was living openly with a man named Jimmy Shields, and he wasn't hiding it. They'd met in 1926, and everyone in Hollywood knew exactly what their relationship was. Joan Crawford adored them. For a while, it seemed like Haynes had found a way to live authentically in an industry built on lies. Then came 1933. Reports suggest Haynes was arrested at a YMCA with a sailor in what was described as a compromising situation. Louis B. Mayer called Haynes into his office with an ultimatum: enter a Lavender marriage or lose everything. Haynes looked Mayer straight in the eye and said something no other star had dared to say. "I am already married." He was talking about Shields. Then he added, "I'll be glad to give him up just as soon as you give up your wife." Mayer fired him on the spot. One of Hollywood's biggest stars walked away from millions and never made another major film. Haynes and Shields launched William Haynes Designs. Joan Crawford, Gloria Swanson, Marion Davies, and Carole Lombard became clients. The business exploded, but in 1936, approximately 100 members of the KKK showed up at their beach home after a neighbor made false accusations. They were dragged outside and beaten severely. Even outside the studio system, they weren't safe. For nearly 5 decades, they remained together. In December 1973, Haynes passed away from lung cancer. 3 months later, Shields put on Haynes's pajamas, took sleeping pills, and climbed into bed. His suicide note read, "I now find it impossible to go it alone. I am much too lonely." While other stars were being forced into marriages they didn't want, Haynes showed there was another option. You could walk away, choose love, and still build something that mattered. Rock Hudson, When the Secret Got Out. Rock Hudson didn't have Haynes's courage, and it cost him everything in a different way. By 1955, Hudson had become one of Hollywood's biggest leading men. But success brought attention, and attention brought danger. Confidential magazine was preparing to publish a story exposing his relationships with men. Hudson's agent, Henry Wilson, made a deal. He threw 2 of his other clients under the bus, offering up damaging stories about actors Rory Calhoun and Tab Hunter in exchange for killing the Hudson piece. But Wilson knew it was only buying time. Just weeks after wrapping Giant, Hudson married Phyllis Gates, Wilson's secretary, in November 1955. Reports suggest Gates knew exactly what she was signing up for, with some sources claiming she was a lesbian herself. Either way, the marriage served its purpose. Hudson's female fans could keep their fantasy intact, and the tabloids backed off. But Gates grew tired of being ignored. In 1958, she hired private investigator Fred Otash to record her conversations with Hudson. Following a script Otash wrote, she confronted her husband while secretly taping him, getting Hudson to essentially admit his true orientation. The plan was to use the recordings as leverage in their divorce. The tapes disappeared, but transcripts exist. The marriage had lasted 3 years, and everyone in Hollywood knew why it ended. Hudson continued making films and became a television star, but he never stopped living in fear of exposure. In 1984, Hudson was diagnosed with HIV. He kept it secret for over a year, even from close friends. When his publicist finally announced it in 1985, Hudson became one of the first major celebrities to publicly acknowledge having AIDS. He died that same year at 59. His life had been defined by hiding, but his death forced America to finally confront a crisis it had been ignoring. Cary Grant and Randolph Scott, the love Hollywood photographed. While some stars hid behind lavender marriages, Cary Grant and Randolph Scott tried something bolder. They lived together openly for 12 years and let photographers document the whole thing. The studio publicity machine somehow convinced America these were just two carefree bachelors sharing expenses. They met in 1932 and were soon sharing a Santa Monica beach house that the press nicknamed Bachelor Hall. Magazine spreads showed them cooking together, lounging by the pool, living what looked exactly like domestic married life. Fashion critic Mr. Blackwell lived with them for several months and later wrote they were deeply devoted to each other, warm and affectionate behind closed doors. But studios couldn't let it continue indefinitely. In 1934, Paramount pressured Grant into marrying actress Virginia Cherrill. The marriage lasted 13 months. Grant moved right back in with Scott the moment his divorce was finalized. Grant would go on to marry 4 more times. Scott married twice. Between them, 7 marriages to women, yet they remained each other's constant. When Scott married an heiress in 1936, Grant responded by marrying Woolworth heiress Barbara Hutton in 1942. The press called them Cash and Carey. By the mid-1940s, mounting studio pressure finally forced them to stop living together publicly. They remained extraordinarily close for the rest of their lives. In the 1970s, a maitre d' would see 2 elderly men at a back table long after other diners had left, quietly holding hands in the darkness. It was Grant and Scott. When Grant died in November 1986, Scott passed away just 3 months later. Their decades-long relationship outlasted every marriage either man ever had. While they never publicly acknowledged what they meant to each other, the photographs remain. Judy Garland, The Price of Knowing the Truth. Judy Garland walked into her lavender marriage with her eyes wide open, and it destroyed her anyway. She was 23 when she met director Vincente Minnelli on the set of Meet Me in St. Louis in 1944. He was 41 and already known in Hollywood circles as flamboyantly effeminate. Before coming to Hollywood, Minnelli had lived openly as a gay man in New York's theater world. Garland knew about Minnelli's orientation before they married in June 1945. Sources suggest she believed their creative partnership and mutual respect would be enough. In March 1946, she gave birth to their daughter Liza. But after the birth, Garland was bedridden for weeks with severe postpartum depression. The studio had been giving her amphetamines since childhood to keep her energized and barbiturates to help her sleep. By this point, she was deeply addicted to both. The marriage began falling apart during the filming of The Pirate in 1948. Reports suggest Garland caught Minnelli in compromising situations twice, once with a young male actor and once with their gardener. Each discovery sent her spiraling deeper into depression and substance abuse. She attempted to take her own life multiple times during their marriage. In 1949, after years of erratic behavior fueled by her mental health crisis and drug addiction, MGM fired Garland after 15 years. The studio that had given her the pills that destroyed her health simply cut her loose. Her marriage to Minnelli officially ended in 1951. Years later, Garland would tell her daughter Liza to marry gay men, claiming they made the best husbands. It was a tragic reflection of how Hollywood's system had warped her understanding of relationships. She died in 1969, at just 47 years old from an accidental overdose. Studios forced these arrangements to protect their investments, but they never cared about what happened to the people trapped inside them. Cole Porter, The Marriage That Actually Worked. Not every lavender marriage was a tragedy. Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas proved that sometimes these arrangements could become something genuinely meaningful. They met at a wedding reception in Paris in January 1918. Linda was a wealthy socialite who had just escaped an abusive marriage. Cole was 28, charming, and living openly as a gay man in Paris. Linda was 8 years older and fully aware of his orientation before they married in December 1919. Their marriage wasn't about physical intimacy. It was about friendship, mutual respect, and a shared love of luxury and art. Linda had the wealth to fund Cole's ambitions, and Cole gave her a place in the creative world she adored. Their life together was extraordinary. They moved between Paris, New York, and Los Angeles, hosting legendary parties. Linda became Cole's most devoted supporter, nurturing his talent and pushing him toward success. Without her, the world might never have gotten songs like Night and Day or Anything Goes. Cole never hid his relationships with men from Linda. He had affairs throughout their marriage. Linda felt excluded at times and reportedly considered divorce when Cole's indiscretions became particularly public in 1937. But they reconciled. Tragedy struck that same year when Cole suffered a horseback riding accident that crushed both his legs. He endured over 30 operations, living in constant pain. Linda stood by him through every surgery, every setback. Despite his suffering, Cole continued composing, writing some of his greatest work. Linda died from emphysema in May 1954. They had been married for 34 years, and Cole was devastated. She once said, "Just because a love between two people may be difficult to define, that doesn't mean it didn't exist." After her death, Cole became depressed and reclusive. His right leg was finally amputated in 1958, and he stopped writing music entirely. He lived mostly in seclusion until his death in 1964. Their marriage proved that Lavender arrangements didn't have to destroy the people in them. When both parties entered with honesty and genuine affection, something beautiful could emerge. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor, the marriage nobody wanted. Sometimes the studio didn't just suggest a Lavender marriage. They arranged the entire thing. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor learned this when MGM took complete control of their wedding in 1939. They'd met in 1936 and started living together on adjoining ranches. MGM didn't want Taylor marrying anyone, wanting to keep him available to his legions of female fans. Then, in January 1939, Photoplay magazine published an article titled "Hollywood's Unmarried Husbands and Wives." Taylor and Stanwyck were named alongside other famous couples. The public scandal forced MGM's hand. Taylor later admitted he wasn't even sure he was in love. "MGM finally gave in to my getting married," he said. "The only thing I was allowed to say about the whole thing was, 'I do.'" The wedding took place just after midnight on May 14th, 1939. Taylor was visibly shaken and mumbled his vows. After the press conference, he went to his mother's house and spent the night there instead of with his new bride. Biographer Axel Madsen described Stanwyck as Hollywood's most famous closeted lesbian, while persistent rumors circulated about Taylor's orientation as well. The marriage only genuinely lasted a few months, according to Madsen, though they stayed officially married for over a decade. Taylor continued seeing other women throughout. He had affairs with Ava Gardner and Eleanor Parker. In 1950, while filming in Rome, he had a very public relationship with Italian actress Lea DeLeo. When Stanwyck flew to Rome to confront him and ask for a divorce, he immediately accepted. The divorce was finalized in February 1951. When Taylor died in 1969, Stanwyck was devastated. Her co-star said Stanwyck always cited Taylor as the love of her life, despite everything. Their arranged marriage had been doomed from the moment MGM took control. These weren't just publicity stunts or harmless business arrangements. These were real people whose lives were controlled, manipulated, and in some cases destroyed by an industry that valued profits over humanity. William Haynes walked away and found happiness. Rock Hudson lived in fear until AIDS forced the truth out. Cary Grant and Randolph Scott found ways to love each other despite the system. Judy Garland was broken by the deception. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor were pushed into a marriage neither truly wanted. Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas built something genuine from an unconventional arrangement. The real tragedy isn't just the individuals forced to deny themselves. It's an entire entertainment system built on lies and threats. Hollywood has changed, but these stories remain as reminders of what happens when image matters more than truth. What other secrets are still buried in those studio vaults?